Welcome everybody to episode number 319 of Goulet Q&A, where fountain pens are still a thing. I'm Brian Goulet here from gouletpens.com, and today I'm going to be talking about knockoff LAMY pens, specifically the All-Star. Reasonable comparables to the giant Maiora Everest that I showed off last time, or was it the time before? I can't remember. I think it might have been the time before. I don't know, it all kind of blurs together for me. Why you would want pens with more than 2 milliliters of ink capacity? It's anyone's guess. And what to do with a stuck TWSBI piston. I'm going to do a reasonable deep dive into fountain pen feed materials and designs. And I have kind of an insane personal story over the weekend that involves some more fallen trees. So, should be a good time. Let's get started off with some feedback. All right, first up from Chuck Bridges says, Brian, Cheyenne is the capital of Wyoming, not Casper. You know what? I don't know why I said Casper was I think the article that I read about the escalators or whatever in Wyoming said that Casper was the capital, but maybe I read that wrong or I just made it up in my head. So I apologize to all our Wyomingians. What do you call yourselves? I don't know. I literally don't know anyone from Wyoming. So if you're from Wyoming, my apologies. Maybe leave a comment and I'll say hello. Tell me what you call yourselves. I'm in Virginia. We call ourselves Virginians, for what that's worth. Anyway, so sorry, Casper is not the capital. Cheyenne is. I did not excel superiorly in geography back in the day. Leslie Johnson says Dorland's wax may be the waterproofing thing that you've been thinking of when I was talking about, like, what do you put over top of fountain pen ink to, you know, like on a letter or something or a journal to keep it from smearing. So Dorland's wax, it's not the product that I was thinking of, but that seems to be a potentially usable product. So maybe look into that if you're into it, but I've no experience with it. I don't think it's exactly the product I was thinking of, but I appreciate the nudge. Gabrielle Stevens says, along the same lines here, there is a product called microglaze. There might be a couple different iterations of a similar product. This is different from microgloss, which is a polish used by many pen repair people. It comes in a little jar and you rub it over the area that you want protected. Alternatives for small areas like an address on an envelope would be rubbing a plain white candle unscented over the area. So that's kind of cool. I think I mentioned beeswax, but yeah, candle wax could also be a potential option. You can also have beeswax candles, so maybe get it all in there. Why not? Let's see here. Another one, Marvin Miyoker says, spray fixative should work well for protecting your written ink from smearing. I haven't tried this for this application, but I've used it to protect charcoal in pencil drawings as well as a watercolor artwork. A couple of tips, use it outside in a well-ventilated area. It has fumes like spray paint. Also, it usually comes in matte satin or gloss finishes, so make sure you get the finish that you want. Okay, that's good to know. Sounds like it's like a spray lacquer almost. I'm sure it's not lacquer, but something like it. So yeah, don't breathe that in. Fumes are bad. Kiger Pony says, the part that holds the nib on an oblique holder is called a flange. So I was talking about the oblique holder for an offset calligraphy. Flange. That's a little brass part there. So, learn something new. Could I have looked that up beforehand? Yes, but I can't look everything up. I have other things I have to do. So I appreciate it, especially when I step outside of my area of knowledge. It's like, sometimes I don't even know what I don't know. You know what I mean? Anyway, let's see here. One more. This is from Sven. Says Q&A, bleach does not kill mold on most surfaces, at most it will make the mold dormant for a chunk of time. This is when I was talking about how to clean mold out of a pen. This is a common misconception that was debunked after MRSA kept breaking out in hospitals despite bleach being used to clean. For something like a fountain pen that is often made of an easily degenerative material when exposed to chemicals, will not only fail to kill the mold, it could actually make the mold problem worse. Bleach is so corrosive that you could end up creating more places for the mold to end up in. Bleach is more of a preventative measure, not a fix for mold. Once the mold is there, you must remove moisture to get rid of it. Bleach will not get into every part of a fountain pen, so the mold is most likely to return. I appreciate the comments here. I have a slight difference of opinion on some of this with some nuances. So not meant at all to be a criticism, and I'm definitely not an expert in this way. So bear with me. I'm not a chemist. I'm not a medical person. But I have some thoughts on that. Mold can remain dormant, but that's mostly going to be on porous surfaces, things like wood and drywall and stuff like that. Most fountain pen materials are not going to fall in that category. It's going to be more like a hard surface. I mean, pens are mostly made of plastic and metal. The one exception might be like ebonite. If you have an ebonite feed, maybe that could be made, but it's also not a very absorbent material. So I think for the most part, bleach is actually going to be pretty effective in that way. There's other materials you certainly can use, like hydrogen peroxide. You can use vinegar. You can use ammonia, things like that. And those are definitely less harsh than bleach. So you could give those a try if you wanted to have more of a stepped approach. But in my experience, and this is my experience like power washing houses too, if you have, like a vinyl sided house and you spray it with bleach and bleach clings on there long enough, it kills the mold and that stuff does not come back for like a while. Like we live in Central Virginia, super muggy, super moldy everywhere. You power wash a house and it stays clean for at least a year or two. So I would imagine in a pen where it's not constantly exposed to the elements and moldy conditions, you'd probably be okay. But again, your mileage may vary. Maybe it depends on your environment and what kind of materials you're working with. You commented about MRSA. MRSA is a bacteria. It's not a fungus like mold would be. So it's my understanding that you might be dealing with two different animals here. So I don't know, it could be, I didn't research this deeply. I don't even know that I would know what I'm looking at if I researched it, but I don't believe that the bleach's effectiveness on MRSA translates directly to cleaning mold out of a pen, but I could be wrong. In my experience, it hasn't been something that again, I haven't had a lot of experience with mold in pens to begin with personally, like firsthand experience, but those that I know that have cleaned it out haven't talking about a pervasive problem of it coming back over and over and over again. Let's see here. Yeah, it is tough to get rid of it everywhere. I will say that there's lots of little nooks and crannies inside a pen. So it's definitely best to try to disassemble your pen as much as you can before you do that. But again, I'll kind of reiterate what I said last time. Yes, bleach is a strong chemical. It can, most pen materials are pretty bleach resistant. The ones that are the least bleach resistant is probably things like gold and, certain metals. Stainless steel's, if it's not exposed for super, super long time, it's pretty bleach resistant as well. So it's again, the key is to dilute the bleach and then not leave it exposed for a super long time. I'm literally talking 10 minutes, and then getting it out of there. And that's it. And you might do that once ever. So I don't think that's going to make a meaningful impact on the degradation of the materials. But again, if it's your pen, do more of your own research because obviously you're more impacted about it than I am just sitting here talking. So, take what I say just as entertainment and, maybe a nudge into some area of knowledge. But if it's your pen at stake, obviously research a little bit more. So, there you go. So hopefully that's a little helpful context there. But I appreciate the additional information. It's a good thing to share what we know. All right, let's talk about a few new things now. Okay, first one we got is a Delta Italian Songs. This is Reginella. So this is another Goulet Pens exclusive that we have. So it's a steel nib pen. So you're going to pay not quite a gold nib pen price, but the pen, it looks awesome. It looks, this is part of our Italian Songs series. So it's the second one that we've done with them. Packaging is great. Pen looks super, super nice. And so, yeah, it looks definitely like a classier pen than you would think it is for the cost. So that's pretty cool. Comes with a bottle of Delta Black ink as well. It's got, little note-filled ring on the barrel, some white accents and stuff. And so, it looks so nice. Different shape than the other one. So check it out. Made in Naples, Italy. It's kind of cool. Number 6 nib, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Let's see here. We got Monteverde Innova fiberglass amethyst. So this is another one of our, it looks like carbon fiber, but carbon fiber is only black. So it's a fiberglass fiber weave. Fiberglass fiber technically isn't all fiberglass fiber, but it's a weave of fiberglass. Anyway, woven like carbon fiber would be, but it's an amethyst color. So nice purple color. Looks really beautiful. We've had this in several other colors so far, and we may or may not have some more planned later in the year as well. So that one's $52, comes with a converter. It's got a number 6 Yovo made nib, extra fine through stub plus OmniFlex nib options. So lots of cool things. So if you like that vibe, but you want it in purple, now you got it. Another one we got is from Delta. This is the Delta Napoli. So this is a little bit more expensive pen. The material on this one looks pretty awesome though. It's got like a blue and gold kind of swirl thing going on with lots of black resin in it as well. And this is, you know, like an ocean kind of themed pen. So Napoli is a beautiful part of the country there. Naples is Napoli. And then it's got these like nice little waves on the center band. It's got a nice rounded top with a finial on the top. So nice details on this one. It's got, you know, nice little accents and stuff. So pretty classy. Looks like a special edition, you know, because it is. This one's going to be $396, so a little bit more, but you get a lot of custom little accents and pieces on there. Oh, sorry, it doesn't have a finial on the top. I misspoke about that. It does have a nice rounded top, though. Yeah, so there you go. You can check that one out. Another Jowo-made steel nib, number 6 size, same nib size options as all the others. And then let's see here, what else we got? Oh man, we got more. Gosh, there's a lot of new stuff right now. Okay, we're going to keep on plowing through because I'm not going to be recording one for next week. So this has got to hold you over. Spoiler alert. Sailor has a new Pro Gear and Pro Gear Slim called Dreamy Hour. So you can check those out. The prices on those are going to vary depending on which pen that you're looking at. So it's either $340 for the Pro Gear Slim or $472 for the full-size Pro Gear. Sailor has been, you know, some of their prices have gone up a little bit. Well, the $340, okay, so that's the limited edition ones. Sorry, the Dreamy Hour, we're looking at $312 and $472. So yeah. Yeah, but nice looking pens. You know, multicolor, kind of purple and cream looking color, a bit translucent. Gold nibs on those, they look really nice. So if you're into that, go check those out. We got them now. We also have the BENU Pixie pens. So this is a little different than the other Pixies because these are not going to be, you know, they're still the little ones like the Pixie is normally, but the other Pixies are all like glittery and, you know, stuff like that. But these are not. These are a little more of a matte color, and it's got kind of like an antiqued finish on it. It's only sold as a set, I believe. Or no, sorry, you can get a set of 3 of them, which are orange, pink, and blue. They're not sold in the individually by color, except in the black version. You can't get the black in the set, only individually. And there is a set of 3, but you can't get those colors individually. I hope that's clear as mud. But the set's $196. The black is $68. These have Schmidt number 5 stainless steel nibs on them. Only available in fine for these ones because it's kind of like a special thing, I guess, that they're doing. But the whole point is it's kind of like a pirate-themed type thing. So it's got skulls and crossbones and stuff like that. They've done some other things like this before with like different tattoo pens and stuff like that. So they've done some really cool designs, and they've had skulls and roses and things like that on different pens. So if you're into that, if you're into that kind of aesthetic, it's pretty cool, and you know, it's definitely on the more affordable end of what you can get from BENU as well. So check those out if you're interested. And then last but not least, I have a new ink. This is a Ferris Wheel Press Starlit Stories. So this is part of their fairy tale collection. The little bottle of ink, little 20 ml thing. It's a deep midnight blue infused with some duochrome shimmer. It goes from purple to gold, and then the ink has some like sheen to it as well. It looks crazy. This is a really cool looking ink. So, you know, it's a bit on the expensive side. Some of their fairy tales inks are, but if you're looking for an ink that just looks very cool and unique and different, looks very different on different papers too, you can go check that one out. Whew. Okay. Lots of new stuff. We're going to have other things. Check out our coming soon. Check out our new arrivals on Goulet pens, and you can see all these plus a lot of other things because things have not slowed down this summer. But that's all I have to share with you today on the new stuff. Got some company updates, and then we'll get into the questions. All right, so first off, I kind of already stole my own thunder, but there's no Q&A next week. I'm taking a week off, and so this one's going to have to hold you over for 2 weeks. We're going to have 2 videos coming out this coming weekend, though, on the main channel. Got a sneak peek of something new. I can't talk about it yet because we can't talk about it until Saturday. So if you're watching this on Friday, look out on Saturday. If you're watching this after Saturday, then it's not a secret, but I still can't say it because I'm publishing this video on Friday. So anyway, we're going to have 2 videos of couple of new pens, so go check those out. Let's see here. Tariff stuff. I thought I would just mention this just because there's been a lot of stuff in the news about tariffs, and the original 90-day stay that was put in place on a lot of tariffs for things like Japan and the EU, which is where a lot of our fountain pen stuff comes from. That was originally supposed to kind of get resolved, updated, whatever, deals to be struck in early July. It's now mid-July. If not late, well, I guess by the time this publishes, it's going to be late July. So August 1st, I guess, is the date. Now that that's all been pushed back to, a lot of us in the pen industry are kind of, kind of sitting at the edge of our seat to see what happens with all this stuff because, things have been thrown around like a 30% tariff to the EU. Not sure where Japan's going to land. Not sure where, other countries, Taiwan, India, where a lot of our products can come from, South Korea, stuff like that. So, we're kind of just like you all, just kind of waiting to see what happens. It's not a boring time to be in the retail business, let me tell you. So what I will say is that, we're gonna do whatever we can, but these are meaningful tariffs that we will not be able to absorb if they go through. If you don't really know how tariffs work, I'm not going to get all into it, but basically, when stuff comes over from another country, whoever is the importer, whether it's a distributor of ours, like Pilot USA, like they get the stuff direct from Pilot Japan, and then they sell it to retailers like us, or there are some brands that we import directly ourselves. Whoever imports it in has to pay the tariffs at customs before it even comes into the country. So we get hit with those tariff costs immediately and have to pay them to get the product in the first place. So then, if there is any kind of misunderstanding about who's paying the tariffs, we're paying the tariffs, and then we can't absorb 30%. So we would pass that on to you all as the customers. So not trying to be political about it, just literally trying to educate you about what you might see depending on what happens with these tariffs. Not the most exciting thing, but if we get hit with high tariffs, none of us who are alive have been through this before. So, but we're going to see price increases coming. I just, kind of steel your nerves, prepare for that. There's a lot of products that come in from other countries. At least if you're in the US, you're going to be affected by this, but a lot of stuff that comes in from overseas, and it's looking like the way that things are shaping up this year, that there's going to be tariffs on a lot of things. So we'll see what happens. We'll try to do what we can. Obviously, we don't want you all to pay more than you need to, but also we need to be healthy and stay in business. So, more on that later, but we're not going to dwell on that too much. We're going to take it as it comes. And you know what? At the end of the day, we love writing. We love sharing writing stuff with you all. So we're going to keep doing our thing, and then we'll just deal with the macroeconomic stuff as we can, which is what everybody else is going to do. So that's about all I have on that. Let's take some questions, shall we? Because that's kind of what Q&A is all about. All right, first question I have is from Rabid Chew. Are there knockoffs of LAMY pens out there? I bought an orange All-Star off eBay to go with a Kuru Toga dive. I don't know what that is. I could have Googled it, but I'm short on time today. To go with a Kuru Toga dive I bought, and found that the nib was not swappable with any of the other LAMYs that I own. Did I just buy an older model, or did I get a knockoff? I don't know. I haven't seen it. I'm not a master of knockoffs because, we're an authorized retailer. That's all I deal in. And it's also not a personal passion of mine to go seek out knockoffs of pens, but I know that they exist. They're prevalent, particularly in places like Amazon and eBay. You really can't control that very much. So, my encouragement is always buy through an authorized retailer if you want to make sure that you get the genuine thing. But it sounds like to me, based on what you're describing, you probably have a knockoff. To my knowledge, they have not made any All-Stars since their inception that use a different nib than their standard LAMY steel nib. So it should be swappable. I don't know your situation. Maybe it's really stuck on there well and it is swappable. It's just hard to get off. I don't know. But, it should, design-wise, if it looks different than your other LAMY nibs, that's not encouraging. It should be identical. It should be capable of being swapped. And then, you're asking about, you said it's an orange All-Star. Well, I'm going to show you the only two orange All-Stars that I am aware of. And you tell me if you think that maybe you got a knockoff. So the only two, well, one of them is bronze, which was a special edition from 2019. It's not that orange, but I could see maybe where it could pass as orange. It's really more of like a goldish orange kind of color, but that's a thing. It exists. Those are somewhat readily available. I checked on eBay, and you can get them for, around the price of a currently available All-Star. So, that's something. So I don't know how much you paid for yours, but if you, paid around that price, it's possible. Maybe if it looks like this, could be bronze. Maybe just the nib is stuck on there. I don't know. The other one, the one that really looks orange here, this is copper orange. This was a special edition from 2015. So you're talking a decade ago since this thing has been available. And these are not the easiest things to find. I remember when these came out, they looked great. They sold quickly, and they were not, they weren't around for even like a full year. So it's not like today where they're around for a minute. This one kind of came and went pretty quickly. So they're harder to come by. Looking at the eBay listings that there are for copper orange, you were looking at between $100 and $150. So if you didn't pay $100 to $150 and the nib seems not swappable, it's not going to be a copper orange, genuinely. I don't know if it doesn't look like this color at all, I don't know, maybe it could be some random special edition, some like retail exclusive, or, some regional thing that I've never heard of, because LAMY does do a lot of regional things, but usually not like totally custom colors. And I don't think they've done a lot of oranges. So I don't know. I can't say with absolute certainty without seeing it and knowing a little bit more, but based on what you told me, I think you might be dealing with a counterfeit. So my apologies on that, but you kind of take a gamble when you're buying, used stuff on eBay. You gotta do some research, and hey, if it writes well, it kind of stinks that it's a knockoff, but I guess you can still enjoy it as a pen as long as it functions properly. So it's not a total loss. Just don't resell it as a genuine LAMY. That would be the only thing. If you know that it's a knockoff, don't try to pass it off as the real thing. All right, next question I got is from Quox. I've missed checking out your videos. The Maiora Everest fountain pen is a beast of a pen. I agree. I feel like your best bet is to unscrew that nib and fill it by syringe to get it fully topped off. Because if you saw the last video I did, that Maiora is kind of a monster. It's let's see here. Where do I have it? I think I have it right here. Yeah, here it is. It's huge. And it was not the easiest thing to fill, at least from an ink sample. It's huge grip, very long nib. But from a bottle of ink, it'll mostly fill okay. I think I was trying to fill it from the bottle that comes with it as well, which was a smaller bottle than most. And I had to tilt it pretty good and, all that. So let's see here. Let me continue with your question. I love the idea, though, of the Everest. What would you consider the alternative that had a solid capacity? Solid meaning like a large ink capacity, I'm assuming. That's how I'm reading it. The price point that makes the price point of the Everest makes it more of a collector's item. It's a $1,000 pen. But I would love a high ink capacity pen that's in a price range of more like $100. Okay, so you can definitely unscrew that Everest. So yeah, that's what I found is, it's like, you gotta be careful because it's a nib, it's gold nib and all that kind of stuff. You don't want to damage anything, but certainly with a, or more than 5 milliliter ink capacity, even if you do unscrew it, you're not going to have to do it that often because that ink is going to last you a minute. But yeah, what else is reasonable? Well, it's a pretty unique pen, so there's nothing that's going to be exactly like it, especially if you're talking literally a tenth the price. You're not going to get an ebonite feed. You're not going to get a gold nib. You're not going to, on most pens, you're not even going to get a piston fill, and you're certainly not going to get something made of ebonite in most cases. So there's a lot of compromises. So pretty much it's like, what's the largest pen you can get, less than $100, that has a high ink capacity? That's kind of what I went with. So I got a bunch of pens to mention. I didn't have time to pull them all out of the drawers and show you, but we'll have pictures to overlay. So kind of going with what you asked me, this one is definitely more of a collector kind of thing. It's only 188 pens, per color worldwide, and it's $1,000. So yeah, it is definitely more of a collector thing, kind of a novelty. But let's talk about some other pens. So an alternative, in that kind of $100 range, I'm going to flex up a little bit on that because there are some, I think, decent options that are a little bit over $100. So if you really fall in love with something that's, $150 or something like that, you'll at least have the information. I didn't want to be too restricted, at least in what I mentioned in terms of the pricing. So first off, I got to say, we're living in a post-tariff world, so hold on loosely to everything that I mentioned here because I don't know long-term what the prices will be on all these. And I want this, I want this video to age more like wine than moldy cheese. So, I'll just give you a caveat here. Any pricing that I mentioned is subject to change in the future, just like it always has been, but particularly in 2025. So the Monteverde MP1, that is a piston filling pen. It's not the largest pen in the world, but it's a decent size pen. It's a good mid to upper mid size pen. It's going to have 2.5 milliliter ink capacity, piston filler. So I would consider that to be pretty high. So you wouldn't necessarily look at that and be like, oh, that's like a dead ringer for the Maiora Everest. But, it's a piston filler. It's got a clear body. It is a pretty good size, and it's within your price range. So that one might be worth a look. Same thing with the TWSBI 580. I guess the TWSBI Eco too. But you're going to be looking at, close to 2 mil ink capacity with both of those. And those are definitely under the $100, especially the Eco. So those could be good options for you as well. TWSBI VAX 700R, that one's going to be a higher ink capacity. You're looking around 2.4 milliliters at that. Pretty good size pen. It's got a big number 6 nib on it, so it's a larger nib than what's on the other TWSBIs. So could be something. I mentioned here the Pilot Custom 823. Because it's another vac filler with 2.5 milliliter ink capacity, but it is out of budget. But whatever. I just mentioned it. It's, maybe somewhat comparable, and it's got the gold nib, so it's going to write. I like the way that writes better than everything else I've mentioned so far, because it's a next level pen. It's a gold nib pen. So I thought I would at least mention it, but you're looking over $300 for that one. Let's see here. Now that's about all I have. Almost all that I have as far as piston fills go. But there's a lot of options to get you high ink capacity if you do an eyedropper conversion. So if you take a cartridge converter pen, eyedropper fill it, you're going to get a huge ink capacity. Now it's not a piston filler, but honestly, you're talking more or less about eyedropper filling your Everest anyway. So why not eyedropper fill some other pen and you'd be fine. So, let's see here. Some to mention, Noodler's Ahab, that is a piston filler. It's definitely not at the level of pen, and it's a flex nib too, so I don't even know if you want to deal with that. But it's a 2 milliliter ink capacity with the piston, and you can unscrew the piston mechanism, take it off, and get over 6 milliliters of ink capacity. So even more than the Everest, because you're filling the whole body of the pen. So, and that pen is much more affordable. You're well under $100 there. Bumping up a little over $100, like the Edison pens. Any Edison pen is going to be eyedropper convertible, and you get 4 milliliter of ink capacity with that. Pens look great, fit and finish is awesome on those, and they all write really well. So, you're looking at more in the 150 plus range for that, but it could be an option. This next one I mentioned, I was just kind of surprised because like the Kaweco Sport, it's a tiny little pen, so it's really not the same as the Everest at all. It's almost the opposite. But it's got a 3 milliliter ink capacity when you eyedropper convert it. So not bad for a little guy, and it's like, $30. So what the heck? I threw that in there. This was a weird mention, but the Pilot Parallel gets you a 4 milliliter ink capacity if you eyedropper it. So I don't know. That pen's cheap too. Really nothing like the Everest in any way other than it has ink capacity. The one that I think, again, if you're stretching your budget just a little bit, BENU could be an option. BENU has a lot of pens that are larger. They are eyedropper convertible, so you can get some like 4 milliliter ink capacity on those pens. It's going to be a little over $100. You're looking in the 150, 160 range for most of those, but it could be an option. Same thing kind of with Franklin Christoph. We don't always have them. We only do like 1 pen a year with them. They're Model 31, but also eyedropper convertible and large ink capacity. Similar to BENU, similar to Edison. And then the last one that I have to mention, again, it's higher on the budget, but it might actually be the closest sort of comparable to the Everest, especially in its ridiculousness. And that would be the Magna Carta Mag 1000. This is the largest eyedropper ink capacity that we have. I think it's the largest ink capacity pen that we sell, period. When you eyedropper convert it, 7.3 milliliters, which is just insane. It's a huge pen. It's all ebonite, just like the Everest are. It has a huge nib, larger nib than anything else that I can think of. Steel nib, but still huge. Ebonite feed as well. So yeah, in terms of like the material, the size, the ink capacity, it's actually, I mean, it's larger than the than the Everest. But anyway, check that one out. Kind of interesting. Next question, the Wilmo 65. I write with my ink pens a lot, and my most used piston feeders are the Noodler's Ahab and Pelikan. I don't know which model, but Pelikan, both of which I use for long form writing. What would be an advantage for having almost twice the ink capacity of those? So yeah, kind of going with the high ink capacity thing. It's one of those things, it's like, you know, it's sort of like if you were like taking vitamins or something. If you're like, oh, if I have even more vitamins, I'll be even more healthy. It's like, well, not really, not if you don't need them. You know, it's the same kind of thing with ink capacity. It's like, well, you can have a larger ink capacity, but like if you don't need that high ink capacity, it's not necessarily gaining you anything, except, you know, I guess if you have normally a pen that's a 2 milliliter ink capacity and you get one that's 4, you would have to fill the pen half as often. There's not really any other advantage to having that, though. I guess cool factor, like maybe if your pen is you know, clear or a demonstrator of some fashion, you know, it's more to slosh around. It looks kind of neat. Or a brag factor, I guess, but probably most people you're bragging to are not really going to care in like the real world. Maybe in our pen world, it'd be like, wow, 4 mil, that's so crazy. But for most people, it's not going to do anything for them. So yeah, honestly, it doesn't really matter that much. And honestly, like for me, at least, I use, you know, if I'm refilling, you know, if I have a pen with that high of an ink capacity, I'm not changing the ink colors very often because, you know, if I have a pen that I want to rapidly change out, I'm going to do like a cartridge converter pen. And most of the time I'm going to fill the converter or like halfway fill the converter because I want to change the inks before I use the whole thing anyway. So I'll rapidly change inks with a pen that's super easy to clean with a bulb syringe. I'm not going to take some pen with a huge ink capacity and change inks from it all the time because it's like more to clean. It's more of a nuisance. So for me, you know, it would just be like I would keep the pen inked up and have to fill it less. So anyway, Pelikan, you know, kind of depends on the model, but I was looking those up, you know, around 1.5 mil, maybe slightly more depending on which model you're talking about. M600 actually is some of the higher ink capacity, even more than a M1000, which is wild. Noodler's Ahab is, you know, that you mentioned is going to be kind of like I just mentioned in the last question. It's going to be 2 milliliters with the piston on it or 6 milliliter plus with the eyedropper conversion. So if you wanted to try out a super high capacity, just eyedropper fill your Ahab and you'd be good to go right there. With all things, it's going to be a law of diminishing returns. When you get too much ink capacity, you could start running into issues with burping and stuff like that. So if you get the ink level lower and you have a really large ink reservoir, your ink level gets low, there's a lot of air in there that can become unstable. There's some debate in the pen world about exactly why that is. Some people speculate it's like the heat from your hand heating up, you know, the inside of the pen and creating more pressure. It also could just be that, you know, it's just unstable, just having, you know, that much kind of air behind it that it's just, you know, easier to break the surface tension of the ink and maybe make it burp a little bit more. But either way, it just tends to be the situation that if you have, you know, a pen with like more than 2 milliliter ink capacity and you get your ink level to like down like 1/3 or something like that, or maybe less, you could notice some more instability. You could notice some burping and really wet writing and stuff like that. Not always the case, but certainly if you're like carrying the pen in your pocket, you know, you got heat and it's moving around a lot, or you leave your pen in a hot car or something like that, you may notice some more burping or like a little splatter, you know, kind of inside the cap and stuff like that when you have a high ink capacity pen. The answer to that would be keep it filled more. You know, if you keep it fuller, there's less instability that happens. But then, like, what's the point? You're just keeping it fuller, but you're still refilling it just as often as you would if you had like a 1.5 mil. So yeah, as far as advantages, It's not a whole ton. So I wouldn't stress about it too much. I think that's why a lot of, unless it's like a novelty kind of thing, a lot of ink manufacturers aren't making pens with capacities beyond like 1.5 to 2 milliliters. Because then you start running into problems, and most people are not using their pens so much that they're like, I have to have that 3 or 4 mil ink capacity. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I think 1.5 to 2 milliliters, just like the pens you already have, it's going to be just fine for the majority of, kind of casual pen users. But it is kind of fun to get something novelty, to get some huge ink capacity. But that's not what most people need. All right, next up, AJ Purcell, sorry. Thanks for all you do to the world of fountain pens. You're welcome. I finally have a question myself. I recently found some TWSBI piston-fill pens in my pen cases that I wanted to use. They had been cleaned out before they went in, but that was a few years ago. The pistons are now thoroughly stuck in place. I've tried putting in soapy water after removing the nib with nothing to report so far. I'm thinking immersing the whole pen in an ultrasonic cleaner next and giving that a shot. Any suggestions are greatly appreciated. Sorry to hear that. That's weird. Normally if there's like an issue with a piston being stuck like that, it's because like ink is kind of dried up in there. But you said you cleaned it out, so that's interesting. This isn't something, I talked to my customer care team. They said they haven't run into this a whole lot either. So this one made me think a little bit. The first thought I have is it might be that it's not like fully stuck. It might just be like it's giving you some resistance, and maybe you're like being, maybe appropriately cautious about kind of overworking it, and you don't want to break anything or force anything. But in my experience, these things are pretty precision machined. I've been using TWSBI pens for really ever since TWSBI was around, and I have a rather extensive TWSBI collection myself of pens that have been sitting around for more than a decade. And, now some of them I haven't inked up ever before, and some of them I certainly have and have been sitting there clean, but I've experienced before where I go to twist the piston and it gives me some resistance at first, and it feels like, oh, this is a little bit concerning. But, it's also, most TWSBI pens are not like so expensive that I'm like, okay, well, this is detrimental and disastrous if I break something. And so I usually just go harder at it, and then it breaks, and then it's, it breaks free, and then it's perfectly fine after that. And then next time I take it apart, I'll grease up the piston a little bit with some silicone grease, and then it's perfectly fine from there on out. So usually it's that the silicone grease is kind of worn away or broken down a little bit over time, especially the silicone grease that TWSBI uses is very thin. And that's just, that's totally fine. That's how theirs is. Ours that we sell is a little pastier. It's a little thicker, so it tends to stick a little bit more. And so that's what I use. I don't use typically TWSBI's included silicone grease, though you absolutely can use that. That's why they include it. But for me, the pasty stuff sticks around a little bit more. So I've had less of an issue of that sticking, again, after I use that are thicker, kind of pasty stuff. So that is my initial thought, is that probably it's not fully stuck. And if it is fully stuck like that, if it's a normal, like an Eco or a regular 580 or something like that, I think you're going to be fine. Like, I don't think it's that big of a deal. Just try cranking it, and absolute worst case, if you wreck something, TWSBI's got pretty decent support, as long as you're not like abusing it. You might have to pay for some shipping, you might have to pay for a part here and there, but they're usually pretty decent about standing behind their stuff. And again, this is not something I've heard about being like a major problem with TWSBI pens, of like them getting stuck and then, not being able to free those pistons up, really. So that's kind of my instinct, is that maybe that's you're just being hesitant and don't want to do it. I don't know, there's other models of TWSBIs too. I don't have more context yet on that, so that's just kind of going off of what I can think of. And then the other thing I wanted to mention, I need to go grab one of the pens, but it has to do, you didn't mention what model pen you have, but if you happen to have an 580 AL or an ALR, or a mini AL, let me grab one of those and I'll show you potentially what could be an issue with those. Be right back. All right, so I have here, this is the 580 ALR, this is the Caribbean with Onyx. But it represents, other models as well. What I'm talking about, though, is specifically the piston mechanism. So if I pull out another TWSBI, just your regular TWSBI, I mean, this is the Iris, which is a fancy trim, but this has got your conventional mechanism. Zoom a little bit. It's got your conventional mechanism with your plastic piston rod and your plastic piston housing. So it's going to flow pretty smoothly, throw some silicone grease on there, and you're good to go. Now, if you have any of the AL versions or an ALR, instead of having a plastic mechanism, it has an aluminum one. And if you look on here, you can see that, I mean, maybe you can see, it's kind of hard with the diamond, the diamond stuff going on there, but it's got, oh boy, that is kind of tough to see. Let's see if I can get it in there a little better. There we go. You can see kind of this white stuff on the piston rod. That is white lithium grease. So that is a different type of grease than the silicone grease. Now they put in their materials, they will put some pretty explicit stuff in there that the silicone grease that they include, it's for the piston seal, but it is not meant to be put on that metal rod. If you put it on that metal rod and that white lithium grease is not there, it can seize up that mechanism. Doesn't happen all the time, but it does happen sometimes. And that's the only time that we've ever seen an issue with something that doesn't want to budge anymore. If that happens, I would reach out directly to TWSBI or reach out to our team, and we'll see if we can help you troubleshoot it a little bit more. You might be in some issues there. But again, they put stuff on there that, that say not to do that. And you didn't even mention what model you have, so I don't know that that's your issue, but I just thought I want to do a little bit of a PSA that, like, if you have an AL or an ALR, make sure that you're using that white lithium grease on there and on the threaded rod, and then just the silicone grease on the piston seal. And then you should be good to go. Other than that, you mentioned an ultrasonic cleaner. You could try that. It wouldn't necessarily hurt anything, especially if you've taken like the nib and the feed out. You mentioned that. Making sure you get the water inside the pen. That would probably make it more effective. Try the ultrasonic cleaner. I don't know that that's necessarily going to do it, especially if you cleaned out the pen first. I don't know what there is to ultrasonically clean, but if you got one and it's handy, what the heck? Why not give it a shot? And that's kind of it. That's kind of all I can think of for that one. So if anybody else has got some ideas, let me know in the comments. But that's what I think you'll be able to, again, I think just crank it and just see what you can do with it. It's probably going to be enough. All right, last question I got for this week. This is Marianne Hommel, frequent poster, frequent question asker. Thanks, Marianne. Question: feeds with fins, most of my pens, versus feeds without, like LAMY. While it seems that the flow is generally the same, I'm curious about the difference. And ebonite versus plastic, I'm ready for a deep dive. All right, Marianne. I will do a controlled deep dive, a tethered deep dive, if you will. So yes, let's talk about some feeds, shall we? So I've got a LAMY here. I've got, another pen that I like to break out every now and then, sort of as a flex, but as a beautiful feed, I want to show it. So what you're talking about, feeds with fins. So LAMY, for example, there's no outside fins here. Whereas if you look at something like a TWSBI, you see that there's fins on the feed. Not unusual. A lot of pens have that. Why are some pens designed differently? Like, does that make a whole lot of difference? Well, I mean, yeah, like the fins do stuff. It's not like they're there just for no reason. But here's a little secret. There's fins in the LAMY feed. Your mileage may vary on this, removing a LAMY thing. Do this at your own risk. I've already pulled this out, so it's going to be easier. It's going to look easier than it would be for you. So first thing I usually do when I'm trying to take it off is I take the nib off, slide that off of there. It's a Goulet grip. But you can use like a piece of, really any kind of piece of rubber, or sometimes a rubber band, but if you have like bicycle inner tube or something like that, all that kind of stuff works well. So it's not the easiest thing to get the feed out of here. I will grab sort of the top and like, cause it's, it's sloped. So it's not the easiest thing to grab, but if you give it enough of a college try, you can usually, kind of pull this thing out of there. Uninked, it's easier. But look at that. You pull the feed out and there's fins. There's fins. They're just on the inside of the grip, that's all. So really all these fins do is they act as like a sort of a regulator, if you will, for the ink. So as you're writing, you got this tiny little slit. Now here the LAMY one is kind of interesting. LAMY's feeds are kind of different because they're like multiple pieces. It kind of goes through this channel. Here's your feed channel right here. So it's this very, very thin line that goes all the way down here. That's where your ink is traveling to get from your reservoir or the cartridge or the converter, and it's going all the way down here. And then it's kind of covered with this little piece. LAMY's the only one that does that, really. Most feeds are going to be less, I don't know, less parts, less what crazy stuff going on. I'm trying to see if I have a pen where I can yank the nib out of it easier and kind of show you what's going on. Anyway. Well, what the heck, I'll try it with my TWSBI. Sometimes TWSBIs can be a little bit much to get out of there. Okay, there we go. So here's the TWSBI feed. So it also has like multiple sets of fins going on. Camera's not wanting to focus so easily. So here's multiple sets of fins going on here. So that's the TWSBI one, but it doesn't have, it's got the feed channel right there. It doesn't have like a separate piece like the LAMY one does. So you can see like, yeah, the design's definitely different on these, and there's all kinds of lines and stuff going on. So, I mean, the long and short of it is you can have fins exposed underneath the nib where you can see it, or not. It may or may not make some difference. There's patents, there's trade secrets to all this stuff. So is that really going to affect whether a pen writes well or not? It's one of those things that it's like, it really depends. It depends how it fits to the nib. It depends on the design. It depends on the housing and how it fits in there. There's a lot of different factors, but feed design is definitely there. It's deep diveable, but the problem is I don't know the details of how it all works. And honestly, even if I was given the information, it's probably more scientific than my small brain might comprehend. So all I know is that they design feeds very intentionally. They design it to fit with the whole system of the nib and the housing that it fits in, and then it has to all work together. So the reason there's so many designs with different feeds is for a lot of them, there's patents and stuff, so they can't just like rip off somebody else's design. So they maybe have to come up with their own. But a lot of times it has to do with, like there's probably different designs on these ones because, the LAMY one is a bigger diameter here. You get the grip is a bigger diameter versus the TWSBI one. And so there's going to be different dynamics at play with capillary action, all that kind of stuff based on the size. So there's all kinds of stuff like that that's going to be a factor. So long and short, you can have fins, you can not have fins. In the end, you just need your pen to work. And they test for that kind of thing. Now, I showed you the Pilot M90. This is a pen that hasn't been made for decades. But how cool is that feed, right? Like it looks so beautiful. It's one of the things I love about this pen. And you're like, what is that pen if you've never seen it? So it has an integrated nib. This is a stainless steel pen. The nib is built into the pen body. They do not make these anymore. I've petitioned so much for them to bring them back. If they brought it back, it'd probably cost like $1,000. It'd probably be ridiculous and no one would buy it because it would be unaffordable. But they still have some vintage ones out there that you can pick up for a less ridiculous, but still kind of ridiculous price. Anyway, I love the pen design, but I just wanted to show that feed. It looks really cool. And the pen writes great. So, there's lots of different ways that you can design them. Here, I'll show the Maiora Everest while we're at it here. That thing's got a crazy feed. Look at that. Look at all those fins. Look how long that feed is, so there's all different ways it can be designed. Now, the other part of your question you mentioned is ebonite versus plastic. That I can do a little more of a dive on. The long and short is it's not typical for you to find a pen that has the exact same thing in both ebonite and plastic. Typically, you're going to have a pen that's designed, it's either going to have an ebonite feed or it's going to have a plastic feed. 98% of the time, it's going to be a plastic feed for various reasons. But when you do have an ebonite feed, there's some advantages to that. The Maiora Everest, for example, has an ebonite feed. So let's go pros and cons. Okay, ebonite versus plastic. Ebonite is a hard rubber material, and ebonite's like a brand, sort of like Kleenex. So we'll just call it hard rubber feed, even though ebonite's like the word that's used a lot in the fountain pen world. So hard rubber. So it's like a vulcanized type rubber. Vulcanized is another trademark term actually from Goodyear, but whatever. It's a treated hard rubber, material, and so. It's a more natural material. It's been processed, but it comes from rubber. It comes from natural rubber trees. And so that is different than plastic, right? And there's some advantages and disadvantages. So Advantages of having an ebonite feed is that ebonite as a material is going to be mildly hydrophilic, which means that the ink is going to spread out nicely over it. It's not super like smooth and glossy. It's going to have some texture to it. So ink is going to do well to like spread out over that feed. And by the action of doing that, it means it's not going to like beat up and kind of clump up as much. Just a natural, like more at a molecular level, the ink is more likely to kind of spread out and spread over that material, and that's going to help with a more consistent ink flow. So that's one way that it does help out. If the material itself, that hard rubber, it's slightly porous. It's not that it's like absorbing the ink so much, but it's more like the texture of the material at like a very, very microscopic level is kind of helping to assist that ink in spreading out, which helps to assist it in flowing through it, right? So that's one advantage, a big one. Slightly porous, I kind of mentioned that. It's going to help with capillary action and consistent flow. And then, ebonite, it is very machinable. Plastic, you're going to have to mostly injection mold these feeds. That's how those are all made. I don't know anybody who's machining a plastic feed. That would be kind of crazy. So you're going to be dealing with something that's machinable, and with machinable like that, you have a lot of control over exactly how you do it. But also you can get some like very sharp edges, which can also have some advantages to it in terms of assisting ink flow. So that's somewhat of an advantage. You can get very precise fins and fine channels and stuff like that, which can help with the ink flow. And then thermal stability. So it's going to have a higher like kind of melting point than plastic would. So, plastic, they basically injection mold these, and they kind of are what they are. Like, it's harder to heat set a plastic feed than it is an ebonite one. So ebonite, you can heat it up, and you can then kind of bend it, and it'll kind of bend up to fit the nib. And everybody I know that is making pens with ebonite feeds is individually heat setting every single nib, or every single feed to the nib. So it's like any variance that there might be, you're sort of like, it's almost like a custom fitting, if you will. It's like getting a tailored suit versus one off the rack, or a tailored dress versus one off the rack, or a hemmed dress versus one off the rack, or whatever. It's going to assist in like getting a really good matchup to the nib, and which will also assist the ink flow. So those are all big advantages to an ebonite feed. Now the cons of ebonite, mostly is cost. It's more expensive of a material because you're talking a natural material versus, just a plastic. Certainly to make a feed out of ebonite is much more expensive because it has to be machined. Not only is it more expensive labor-wise and machining-wise, but then also the material itself, because it is kind of porous and natural, there's a lot of like voids that can naturally be in the material. I've talked to pen makers that make ebonite feeds, and they say they can only use about 30% of the feeds that they even try to manufacture because there's some kind of defects that show up once you start machining it. So there's a lot of waste in the process, waste of material, but also waste of time. If you're only able to keep 30% of what you're manufacturing, those costs can add up over time. So those are some cons. And then the other cons is that, because it's a natural material, it can break down over time. It can be susceptible to sunlight exposure, UV, oxidation, basically. Ebonite in particular, hard rubber in particular, can kind of develop like a sulfur kind of smell as it breaks down. So it's something that it still lasts a really, really long time. But it's gonna break down a little bit more. Depending on how it's stored and used. Plastic feeds, definitely the most pervasive. The main pro is going to be cost and mass producibility. So the vast majority of all your pens that are going to be anywhere near affordable is going to have plastic feeds. And honestly, modern plastic feeds are pretty darn good. So it's not like a night and day world of difference for an ebonite versus plastic feed, like probably it was more in the earlier days of fountain pens. The material, the precision, the material science was, probably more worlds apart back then. Today, you can get a lot of really good pens with plastic feeds. So you typically only see them on like higher end pens, collectible, things like that. And then plastic is going to do well at resisting absorption and oxidation and stuff like that. So it's going to be, pretty durable over time. It certainly can break down, but typically it doesn't in the same way that ebonite does. Some cons. Well, with plastic, it's going to be the kind of a smoother, non-porous material. So, the assistance that the porous nature of the ebonite would have in a feed, you're not going to have that with plastic. So a lot of times what manufacturers do is they'll have, somewhat of a matte type of finish to the plastic if they can, but it's not always easy to get that, especially like in between the fins and stuff like that. So it's going to be a smoother surface overall than ebonite, which means that it's not going to assist in that consistent flow quite as well. And then, the ink doesn't adhere, kind of as well, again, because of the texture. So that's really your biggest con in terms of the plastic. And then you can't as easily heat set it as well. You can still do it though. Not with a flame. I don't recommend using a flame to heat set any feed, even though some people do, but usually it's like if I will like heat up, some hot water in, like a microwave or something, do it as if you were like making hot cocoa or something like that. Get it to that temperature, not boiling, but like pretty hot. And then you can, even with a plastic feed pen, you can put that feed in there. I find that you have to kind of leave it in there for a little bit. And then, it's not going to be as pliable as ebonite would be, but it can still be done. So, do you need to do that with most of your pens? No. But, if you have a pen that's not writing quite as well, especially if it's an ebonite pen, you feel like you're having flow issues, heat setting the feed is like the first thing that is good to do. But you can do it with plastic, it doesn't work quite as well. The overall of that is like, yeah, both feeds are pretty universal and they write pretty well. I wouldn't like lose a whole lot of sleep over what it's made of because honestly, they're pretty good either way with a lot of modern pens. But, if you really want to get the like creme de la creme, or if you're having a pen that is like really heavy ink flow, especially like a flex pen or something like that, that's where ebonite really can make a big difference. That's why Noodler's uses all ebonite feeds for their pens. It's kind of insane that their pens are the prices they are and they have ebonite feeds. But Noodler's is unique in that way. That's my moderate deep dive into fountain pen feed materials and design. So apologize if I couldn't go as deep in some areas as you wanted to, but see if that can hold you over for a while. All right, I do not have a spotlight for this week, but let's go ahead and get into my crazy adventures. All right, so I've had like a lot of personal stuff, good family time, just my kids. I just keep saying like my kids are teenagers and they just, I don't know, I'm having such a blast having teenage kids. Now they haven't started dating yet. We're driving, though, my son is at the age now where he is going to be qualified to get his learner's permit. So he's studying for that now, which is kind of insane, but he's a very responsible kid. And, so I'm working on kind of training him on that. And it's so funny because he's like looking at road signs now and looking at all these things where previously you'd ask him like, oh yeah, it's this road and get there. And he's like, huh? Yeah, because I remember being a kid and like I paid no attention to where anything was when I was in the car. And then as soon as you think about driving, you're like, oh, I need to like know where I'm going and how to get there and, what not to do on the road. So he's all of a sudden paying attention to road signs, which is fun. So anyway, so I've had a bunch of like kind of personal stuff like that and just boring things like going to the dump and blah, blah, blah. But I had a kind of a crazy Saturday. So I at least wanted to share that with you. So part of it was like, I sort of planned, I knew, so I have a neighbor of mine who's a widow, and, she's a little bit older, and had some landscaping needs, so there'd like been a tree that fell and broke part of a fence. So there's a little bit of tree cleanup, some fence work. We've had so much rain here in Virginia this year so far. So weeds are just taking over everything. So she had weeds everywhere and small saplings that were growing in her, various, landscaping things. And she just needed some help. So, me and some friends, got together and wanted to help her out. So that was cool. Felt good. I knew like schedule wise, I was the one kind of coordinating the thing. So, I knew I had a drum lesson scheduled for 2:30. And so I knew I was like, okay, I can't have this event go anywhere past 2. And I knew depending on how involved I got and how dirty I was going to get and all this stuff, I knew it was going to be tight on time for me to get back home and shower and all that kind of stuff before I went to my drum lesson. So I kind of had prepared to go straight from my landscaping to my drum lesson, which, just for perspective, I'm outside in like 1,000% humidity, sweating my tail off and getting incredibly dirty. And then I'm going to be going into a small room with another dude and we're going to be like playing drums for like an hour plus straight. And I was like, I'm going to smell. This is going to be bad. So I knew I was in for that. Did not disappoint. You know, I had full change of clothes, deodorant, cologne, everything. You know, but it's just, that's what ended up happening. You know, I was wrapping up part of the project and I couldn't leave in time to go shower like I was, you know, maybe hoping I could. So I went in there full musk into my drum lesson, but it was cool. He didn't complain at all. I gave him fair warning. And then of course, like my lesson was all about, you know, trying to learn some double bass pedal stuff. So here I am, I've been landscaping all morning and now I'm going in here and basically just destroying my thighs for like over an hour straight. So I was pretty tired. So finally went back home, showered, all that kind of stuff. You know, Rachel and Ellie had like a little girls' night. So Joseph and I went out to dinner. And then while we were at dinner, we had the most insane weather. Huge storm blew through. Like, it was crazy. It was like blowing like street signs across the parking lot, and just it was wild. Very intense there for a bit. So, you know, we're like, great. And the storm was supposed to go for a while, so it let up enough for us to run out to the car. And I'm like, okay, let's get home, and then we can, you know, kind of do our thing as guys. So we go to drive home, and, you know, on one of the major roads to get home, there's this massive pine tree. Massive pine tree. I mean, this thing had to be about 3 feet in diameter at the base. This thing was huge. I don't know how tall it was, but it was, I mean, it was big and had huge branches. So it was more of like, you know, a lot of the trees on my property are really tall, but it's like densely packed woods, so the branches don't go out very much. It's all kind of at the top. Well, this one was like a standalone tree right by the side of the road, so it had lots of large branches. It was still pretty tall, but this thing fell straight across the road. And I was like, cool. It was like a 7 or 8 mile detour. The shortest detour that I could go was like 7 or 8 miles to get to our house. But there was a police officer there, you know, kind of there, because it's obviously a huge tree across the road. This had just happened because we just drove like, I don't know, 45 minutes earlier, and that tree was not there. So, you know, of course, me being me, I was like, let me go talk to the police officer and just see like, what's up with this tree, you know, because like literally I'd been cutting up trees earlier that day. And so I went to him and I was like, hey, what's going on with the tree? And he's like, yeah, he said, I don't know how true this is, but he told me literally there's like 8,000 trees down, and VDOT, which is like the, you know, Virginia Department of Transportation, he's like, yeah, and VDOT, they're going to be at least probably like 8 or 10 hours before they can come and get this one. And I was like, okay. I know we have, you know, it's a somewhat rural area, but I know there's a lot of like older people that live around us. And I was like, that's gonna be really bad if like an ambulance can't get through here or whatever. And I was like, well, I'm already kind of tired, but it was like 7:30 at night. And I was like, well, there's still daylight. It's like, so I kind of offered to him. I was like, well, you know, I've got a tractor, I've got chainsaws, you know, what if it was like sort of close enough where I could get to it fairly easily. I was like, what if I came and helped out, you know, even just to like help until VDOT comes, it's less work. I can just help move it along faster. And he was like, that'd be great. I was like, so let me call up a couple buddies, see if I can get some people out here. Well, everybody I called was busy. So here I am. I've told this police officer, it's like, I'll come and try and help and try and take care of this. I felt pretty confident, like it's a big tree, but you know, I can cut off the branches and move those out of the way and then sort of buck it up, get it out of the road at least, kind of move the stuff off to the side. So he's like, great. So he called off VDOT so that they could focus on other trees in the area, because apparently it brought a lot down. And of course they're dealing with like power lines and all this kind of stuff. So I was like, okay. So I was out there for, you know, a good while, 2.5 hours probably, working to clean that tree up. And actually there was another neighbor that like kind of saw me working out there and like came over with his chainsaw. And so we're both out there kind of cutting stuff up. It was a nice guy. I had never met him before, and, you know, so it was kind of cool. It's like, you know, it's like doing like the neighborly kind of community thing. I don't know. There's something kind of cool about it. And my son wanted to build his Gundam and stuff anyway. So like he was fine. So yeah, just went out there and helped cut up this massive tree and move it out of the way. And then it was cool. And then, yeah, it got dark and moved it all the way. And I was like, you know, the police officer, I was like, cool, well, thanks, you know, and went on my merry way. So it's like, you know, kind of neat. So it felt good to like do that from a kind of community service standpoint. So, but this was after I'd been landscaping and drum lessons. I was pretty dang tired at the end of that. I finished at like 10:30 at night by the time I got everything packed up and all that. So yeah, I was a tired boy. Come Sunday, a bit sore, but I'm doing just fine now. So anyway, that was my cool adventure story. It was fun. I have some pictures that I've probably already shared with you at this point, but anyway, I just have to remember to upload them. Anyway, that's all I've got for this week. I didn't even pull a fun fact for you, but you know what? It's getting late and I got to go get dinner for my family. So I don't have a fun fact for you this week. I'm so sorry. Maybe you can leave your own fun fact in the comments. How about we work together as a community? Come up with some fun facts together. Anyway, I will not see you next week, but I plan to be here 2 weeks after that. Thanks for watching. Check out gouletpens.com. Support us. That's how we fund this whole thing. I hope you all have a wonderful next couple of weeks. I really, really do. Appreciate spending time with you. Thanks for inviting me into your life, and right on.